Week 11 of the fantasy football season. Here's tight end starts, sits every matchup. This week, Thursday Night Football, Washington Commanders at the Philadelphia Eagles. So Zach Ertz last week, he had a pretty decent game. He's the number 2 target in this passing game, I believe, for this Commander team, behind, obviously, Terry McLaurin. And this week versus one of his former teams, the Philadelphia Eagles. I think Zach Ertz, he goes out there, has a nice performance, 7-10 fantasy point range, usually in PPR leagues. Dallas Goedert, he's a start for me. Last week returned from the hamstring injury. I know he's still not 100%. I still know he's the third, fourth option in this passing game for this Philadelphia Eagle team. But Dallas Goedert, when you least expect it, he comes up and he makes plays. And we know he's still a good tight end that has capabilities of finding the end zone, making plays, and putting up some fantasy points. With Goedert back in the lineup last week, finding the end zone, and it looks like he's going to play again this week. He's a start. Indianapolis Colts at the Jets. Kyle Granson, Mo Alley-Cox, whoever you want to say from this tight end room in Indianapolis. They just haven't put up fantasy points, and they're not going to be fantasy options, so they're easy sits. Tyler Conklin, he had a couple pop games here and there this season, but now when you got Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams in the passing game, Breece Hall out of the backfield, he's not going to get a lot of targets, he's not going to get a lot of looks, and he's not going to be a fantasy option even with 4 teams on bye. Baltimore Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mark Andrews, he's a start. The last few weeks, he's definitely turned the season around. Was Mark Andrews, where the first 5 weeks of the season, he didn't really do much, but the last 3 out of 4 games, he's had double-digit fantasy points. Last week, a big game, 18 fantasy points in PPR leagues. And this week in a division matchup where I could see it being high-scoring or grinded-out type of game, it's going to go one way or the other. I still think Andrews, he's going to make some plays in this game. He's going to put up some fantasy points, and he's a tight end. I would start this week. Pat Freiermuth, he found the end zone last week. And in terms of guys catching footballs and making plays, it's obviously improved with George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, and we saw newly acquired Mike Williams find the end zone last week. So Freiermuth, I have confidence in him this week. He's going to find the end zone. We know Russell Wilson throughout his career has always liked targeting the tight end as a security blanket. And this week, in a big matchup in the AFC North, I think once again we see Freiermuth have a decent game. Minnesota Vikings at the Tennessee Titans. TJ Hockenson, he looked pretty much 100% healthy almost last week. A big ball game for Hockenson. And those are great weapons, obviously, for Sam Darnold. Justin Jefferson and Hockenson. So Hockenson last season, before he went down with the knee injury, he was a top 2, top 3 tight end all season long, hovering in that range with just a carousel of quarterbacks. So Hockenson, one of the best tight ends in the league overall. He could go out there, he could run all the routes. He's a matchup problem. And this week at a Tennessee defense that is middle of the pack, but I don't think it's a matchup that scares me off at all, where Hockenson looks like he's back right now, and he's going to be a top option this week. Chigga Kwango, Nick Vannett, Wiley, whoever you think in this tight end room. Could believe any of these tight ends have fantasy value. They've had a couple games here and there each of these tight ends. And pretty much Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, the only options in fantasy football for this Tennessee Titan team, I believe. So this week in a tough matchup versus Minnesota, I wouldn't recommend any of those tight ends. Cleveland Browns at the New Orleans Saints. David Njoku, he's been a nice target of Jameis Winston. I know he's had 2 good games, 1 down game since Winston's been there at quarterback. But Njoku, we know he's one of the better athletes at the tight end position. This Brown team, I know they got some weapons. Cedric Tillman's definitely emerged over the last couple weeks. Jerry Jeudy's playing good football. But David Njoku, he's a good tight end. He's a matchup problem. We saw Kyle Pitts last week go out there, have a decent ball game. And I think Njoku could get a similar type of line to what Pitts did last week in that 9-10 point fantasy range in PPR leagues. Taysom Hill, he's a flex. And I've said this video after video when Hill comes up. It's either he's going to get that touchdown or he's just going to get a collection of yards in passing, rushing, and even catching the football. So Taysom Hill, if you don't find that end zone, he's not going to have fantasy value. Where last week he was stuffed, and the 5-yard one was Taysom Hill, and he didn't find the end zone. So this week, I know it's a decent matchup. Brown defense hasn't done much all season long. But like I said, he's tough to trust, Taysom Hill, if he's not finding the end zone. So he's a flex option. Juwan Johnson, Foster Monroe, had some flashes, especially Monroe has found the end zone a few times this season. But there's not enough volume. There's not enough targets. And even with Chris Olave out at least a few more weeks, and Shaheed, who's been out for a while and out for the season, obviously, these guys still not producing or putting up numbers. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Detroit Lions. Evan Ingram, he's a start. This offense, they're banged up, obviously. Christian Kirk out for the season. Brian Thomas, we know he's been playing through a rib injury. And also now Tank Bigsby is banged up. And Trevor Lawrence, he possibly might be out for the season. But Evan Ingram, he's still going to get his catches. He's still going to get his target. Mac Jones, I know he's not a good quarterback at all, and he's been a quarterback, definitely a bust since he was a high draft pick a few years ago from the New England Patriots. But I still think Evan Ingram, he could overcome Mac Jones at quarterback. And there's going to be a lot of garbage time in this ball game where they're going to throw nonstop, so he's a start. Sam Laporta, he looked good in last week's game before he left with a shoulder injury. Right now, it's up in the air if he's going to play. So if he plays, it's a great matchup. Him and Goff were starting to get back on the same page a little bit over the last couple of weeks. And if you don't play, Brock Wright's going to step in and be the starting tight end. So I know Sam Laporta, he's been a bust this season. He was the number 1-2 tight end off the board, second, third round range. He was going in fantasy drafts. But it just takes a couple games to get back up there in the tight end rankings. So if Sam Laporta plays, great matchup versus Jacksonville, he's a starter. And if Brock Wright's the starter, he's not going to start for me. I know he's had some flashes throughout his NFL career, is Brock Wright, and he's a big target. But then I just think it's more targets for Jameson Williams and even more targets for Gibbs out of the backfield. So Wright would be a sit. Green Bay Packers at the Bears. Tucker Kraft, he's a start. He's a good option in this passing game for Jordan Love. And we know Kraft, he's one of the better yard after catch tight ends as well in the NFL. We saw it early in the season. He had a nice 66-yard catch in a ball game at the Tennessee Titans. And he's a big target as well. And he's had a couple pop games as well as Tucker Kraft. So I think in this passing game, he's number 3 option behind Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, with Christian Watson, Tavian Wake. Those guys are in and out of the lineup, it seems like, at times. And they're going to make some plays here and there, but Tucker Kraft, I still believe, is the number 3 option in the passing game. And a tight end that can help fantasy owners. Cole Kmet's a sit pretty much in this offense. There's no one you could trust. The last 3 weeks, they haven't put up points on the board. I know Cole Kmet's had a couple big games this season, no doubt about it, but you're not just going to sit and wait week after week for him to go out there and have a big game 1 out of 4 weeks. So this week, yes, he could have the breakout game, and the surprising game is Cole Kmet, but it's just a risk in my opinion. He's a sit. Las Vegas Raiders at the Miami Dolphins. Brock Bowers, obviously locked in, must start weekly, top 3 option. Good matchup at the Miami Dolphins with their defense. I know last week went out there, played a good ball game, no doubt about it, the Los Angeles Rams. But I just believe that Dolphin team, it was Monday night and they were a little more amped up, obviously being on the Monday night ball game. But their defense, they'll still go out there and make plays in this game because this Raider offense isn't all that great. But Brock Bowers, he's a matchup problem. I've said this video after video as well with him. He's a top tight end in the last decade to come out. And he's a matchup problem when no one could guard him, obviously. Jonnu Smith is a sit. Last week, Jonnu Smith, he almost found the end zone, getting stopped at the 1-yard line. And he's definitely getting more plays in this offense for this Miami Dolphin team, where Jalen Waddle's pretty much been non-existent. Tyreek Hill, even with Tua back, his numbers haven't been all that great, even though I know he's not 100% with the wrist injury. But Jonnu Smith, like I said, inconsistency is going to be there for him. And if he didn't have that big 33-yard catch after breaking a couple tackles, it was going to be a down ball game for Smith. Los Angeles Rams at the New England Patriots. Kobe Parkinson is sit. This offense now with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back over the last few weeks. Those 2 top guys, they're going to get a lot of targets, obviously. They're going to get a lot of looks from Matthew Stafford. He's locked in on them, and rightfully so, as the top 2 options. And we also know Kyron Williams out of the backfield is a good receiver. And DeMarcus Robinson, besides last week, is a solid number 3 wideout on this roster. So Parkinson, pretty much the 5th option in this offense. He's a sit. Hunter Henry, there's going to be weeks where he'll have some decent weeks and inconsistent weeks, like last week where he didn't do much for fantasy owners. So Hunter Henry, I still have him as a flex option. I know it's a decent matchup versus Los Angeles Ram team. And let's be honest, they don't have much in the passing game. Obviously, is this New England Patriot team. Jalen Polk, Demario Douglas, Bote, Kendrick Bourne. So Hunter Henry, he'll get some stats, but week in and week out, it's tough to trust him in an offense like this. Atlanta Falcons at the Broncos. Kyle Pitts is a start. Him and Kirk Cousins, they definitely built up the rapport over the last few weeks. I know Pitts, he's had a couple down games here and there, but he's still a tight end that's going to put up top 10 numbers at the position. And we just need him to score a little bit more for him to really move up the ranking board. So even in a tough matchup at Denver, I give him the nod. Adam Troutman, he had a couple games here and there this season. Nothing eye-popping and nothing where you're going to be convinced week in and week out to put him in your starting lineup. So this week, I know this Falcon defense really isn't all that great, but still, Troutman's not a tight end with a high ceiling. He's a sit. Seattle Seahawks at the 49ers. Noah Fant is a sit. If DK Metcalf returns in this lineup. He's the 4th or 5th option in the passing game here is Noah Fant. I know he's a good tight end. I know he's a good yard after catch player as well. But like I said, when you're that 4th or 5th option in a passing game, the numbers just aren't going to be there and line up weekly. And in a tough matchup at San Francisco, he's a sit. George Kittle, he's a lock week in and week out as a start and a top 3 tight end weekly. George Kittle could run all the routes. He's a yard after catch machine at the tight end position, and he's a matchup nightmare for any linebacker or safety, whoever covers him. With Brandon Ayuk out, more targets have gone his way, even though Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall looked good last week as well. But this week in a good matchup versus Seattle, I think he goes out there and is a top 3 performance. Kansas City Chiefs, Buffalo Bills, game of the week. In my opinion, Travis Kelce back to being the number 1 option in the passing game for this Kansas City Chiefs team, and he's putting up numbers. Him and Mahomes are back on the same page, and I just don't know what it was earlier in the season. Maybe Kelce wasn't 100%, or Rashee Rice was getting that open when he was healthy that Mahomes couldn't turn it down and had to go his way. But either way, Travis Kelce, great track record versus Buffalo, and this week I expect him to go out there and have a big game once again. Dalton Kincaid left last week's ball game with a knee injury, tried to return. He did for a little bit, and then couldn't give it a go at the end. So if Kincaid plays, he's a start, because I believe this is going to be a high-scoring game between these two offenses, obviously. But Kincaid, we'll see if he plays. If Kincaid plays, he's going to be a start, because his floor is pretty much 7 fantasy points in PPR leagues, and you could find worse the way this tight end position has been going this season. Dawson Knox is a sit for me in this one. I think Dawson Knox, he's a decent backup tight end, but like I said, the reps haven't been there all season long. I know he had a big season a few years ago with this Bill team, but if they were 100% confident in him, obviously, they weren't going to go out there in the first round in last season's NFL draft and take Kincaid. Cincinnati Bengals at the Chargers, Mike Gesicki a start. I believe T. Higgins won't play in this game. I know he's day-to-day right now with the quad injury. He has an opportunity to return in this game, but with their bye week in Week 12, I think they sit him out, and then after that, they get him 100% healthy is Cincinnati. So Mike Gesicki, he's been a big target. Joe Burrow, been one of the best quarterbacks all season long, getting the football down the field, making plays. And Mike Gesicki at the Chargers, even though it's a tougher matchup, I have him as a start. Will Dissly, he's had a couple decent games here and there for this Charger team. Number 3 option in the passing game, but we haven't seen enough consistency for me to put him in the starting lineup. He's a sit in the final game of the week. Sunday night, Houston Texans at the Cowboys. Dalton Schultz, he's had a couple decent games here and there, but I'm anticipating Nico Collins returning to the lineup, but that means less targets here for Dalton Schultz. And Schultz, no doubt about it, he had a pretty good game last week versus the Detroit Lions on Sunday night, but this week with Collins back, and I know it is his former team, the Dallas Cowboys, he's going to want to stick it to him. I just don't see Schultz being productive week in and week out as a tight end to have confidence in. He's a sit. Jake Ferguson is sit. With the quarterback problem now for Dallas with Dak Prescott out, Ferguson obviously was making plays with Prescott at the quarterback position. I think Cooper Rush, he could go out there and get Ferguson the football, but the way teams are going to cover Dallas, they're going to take out Lamb and Ferguson and actually try to force Dallas to beat him with the run game and other options. So Ferguson, like I said, the ceiling just isn't high with whoever's going to start Rush or Lance at quarterback. So that's tight end start sit every matchup for Week 11 of the fantasy football season.